Well, I'm so excited to sit here with our hopefully future Lieutenant Governor Pricilla Giddings. Thank you so much for joining me.
Absolutely. Thank you, doctor.
So tell me a little bit. You're running for Lieutenant Governor, and I mean, as an Idahoan, I'm originally from Sweden, but I lived here for more than 20 years, so I feel that I'm more Idahoan than a lot of people actually are. Um, why do you feel that you are the right choice to be a lieutenant governor? What's your background?
Right. So I'm going to say my conservative values and my leadership. And I know and love Idaho, and we want to keep it a strong conservative free state. And so a little bit of my background. I grew up in Idaho for the most part in a Christian family. My mom was in education, my father was in law enforcement. We got to live in Israel for a year and I witnessed terrorism firsthand. And I quickly realized we have so many freedoms in America we don't even realize we have, and it's something we need to fight for. And so I went off to the Air Force Academy and then went on to be a fighter pilot and then flew MC-12s to nearly 1,000 combat hours in Afghanistan and saw, my friends, even from right here in Idaho, give up their life in that fight for freedom for the Afghanis, to have the rule of law, to have fair elections. And yet I would call home and I would hear about things in Idaho where they were kind of slipping the other way and we were losing our freedoms right here in Idaho. So I felt compelled to get involved in the fight locally. So I transitioned off active duty into the Idaho Air National Guard, and then I'm currently a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force Reserves. So 20 years plus of military leadership and training and all that comes with that, public speaking and being an ambassador for our values. And I jumped into the legislature back in 2016, and I quickly realized that we're not as conservative as we're being led to believe. And actually, this year, I would say that we are number one on the radical left's agenda to try to flip our state back towards, more progressive values. We see hundreds of millions of dollars flooding into campaigns and trying to negatively impact policy towards socialist ideals, things that I experienced living in Europe in the military. Socialized medicine, which I can share firsthand, is not a pretty thing when you're trying to get good care. And so it was that first year I also, in the legislature, I met my husband, who's a fourth generation farmer from Southern Idaho, and we have two little girls. And every day I'm reminded that they're in some ways not even able to have the same opportunities that I had as a kid. And so that just kind of ignited the fire in my belly. And over the last 2 years, we have seen our executive branch not enforce the rule of law, even the Constitution, whether it comes to closing churches, businesses, or teaching critical race theory in schools. Those are all unconstitutional things. But if you don't have an executive branch that's going to fight for those freedoms, then you lose them forever. And that's why this election is the most important one ever. I'm up against a very establishment Republican who has been 22 years career politician, and he's backed by Big Pharma and Pfizer. And that's where I think we really clash differently. I haven't had one lobby contribution from these huge global companies or lobby interest groups. On the other hand, I have been fighting for health freedom for Idahoans. One of the main things actually started House Bill 140 before COVID that would have stopped discrimination of employees based on their vaccination status. And we got it through the House, surprisingly, and then it was just dead on arrival in the Senate. They wouldn't even allow it a public hearing. And that's just a small example of the corruption and how we've lost our constitutional republic. If you can't let a legislative process work and function, then you're not going to get good things for Idahoans. You're getting good things for what the businesses want. And we've seen that with lots of legislation. So when it comes to integrative medicine and health, I respect what you do so much, whether it was in my time living in Europe and seeing how much more they have allowed the freedom of integrated health in Europe, surprisingly, and to see the strongholds that we have. But really, it's big pharma that is stopping this health freedom, I think, in the United States and in Idaho specifically. And we can see how what an influencer they are in Idaho politics. Just this last session, we saw Blue Cross push a bill through the legislature, and they paid off 62 legislators to get their bill through. So when you have companies that are more powerful than what the people need and want, that is very concerning. So that's one of the reasons I want to jump into the executive branch and to fight for health freedom from the top down.
I really appreciate that. And like you're saying, I mean, we need to reestablish our recognition that the law of the land is the Constitution. And it seems like, especially these last few years that we've gone through, is that we have, the legislators have seemed to have forgotten that, and the executive branch seemed to have forgotten that. And so we need somebody that's willing to step in and to take that fight on. And I mean, I've known you for a number of years, and with your background, I mean, there are no ifs and buts about that. You're a fighter. I mean, you're you're not willing to shy away, just to lean in and get things done.
Absolutely. We have too much on the line, and we need to draw the line in the sand. People say, oh, Idaho's one of the most conservative states in the nation. Well, then how come Florida's making all the headlines? I'm tired of being jealous of Florida. We need strong, courageous leadership that's proactive in our executive branch. And, I would love to be on the phone with, Florida every week, just say, okay, what's the next plan of attack against these people who are trying to take over our country? So,
Yeah,
yeah.
and it's that complacency, like you're saying, you have the radical left that is spending a huge amount of money to try to take Idaho over step by step. And us as Idahoans, if we are complacent and not willing to step in and do what we need to do, all of a sudden we'll wake up and we won't have the Idaho that we knew.
Yeah, there's so few people that vote in the primary, even educated people who are, they vote all the time. Well, they only vote in November. They don't realize they need to vote in May. And in Idaho, that May election really does determine the outcome, the final verdict. I mean, 90% of the time. So we'll probably only have about 200,000 Republicans vote in May. Yet we had 550,000 who voted for Trump. And so the only way we're really going to hang on to our state is if we get people to show up on May 17th to vote in the primary.
Yeah, and you made an excellent point in regards to the career politicians, and they look Republican, they say they're Republican, but yet they are funded by these big pharmas, big organizations, and they have because they've been in legislation so long, they've lost connection with who voted them in, and they have established these relationships with these lobbyist powers that are funding their ability to stay in power. So we need to shift that balance, because what we've seen the last few years is that the way things are now is not freedom.
Exactly. And, having probably family in Europe, you've seen what that looks like. And having only seen glimpses of it myself, I'm traveling and working overseas. I see the effects creeping into our state. And a lot of I think some of the problem is that we have so many Idahoans who really have not gotten to see what the effects of socialism are, and they don't recognize it. And that's why I think a lot of people are moving here from other states, and they're the ones who are very politically active because they've witnessed it in their own state, and they're saying, wake up, you're losing your freedom and there's nowhere else to move. It's time to stand up.
Yeah, and it is interesting to see the people that are coming from other countries, like myself, from Sweden, socialistic country. I love Sweden. I don't like the politics. I have patients from Russia, patients from other countries where they have socialistic medicine, and you think it's all great and wonderful, but you don't realize that all of a sudden you have then a higher power that will then guide your care, meaning that you will only given so much access as they allow you to, because now you don't have the freedom to choose other options.
Right. And for a quick little personal story, I had two situations. One, when I was a kid, we were kind of in socialist medicine, and they thought I broke my arm. And so they put a cast on it. And then several weeks later, like, oh, actually, we were wrong. You didn't really break your arm. And then also I had an aunt traveling to visit me in Europe, and we were in France, and she had a medical emergency, and we went to the hospital. And I mean, I remember bugs crawling around on the floor, and lots of mentally unhealthy people who were in the emergency room because there was nowhere else for them to go. And it was very awkward, barely a curtain separating people. And then we left, and they said, your bill is $10. And it was just, it was eye-opening for me, because that's kind of that socialist medicine, but yet, and I don't want bugs on the ground when I go in for medical care. So
Yeah, somebody has to pay for that service. And so obviously if everyone is utilizing it and nobody's paying into it, then the quality of care is going to be decreased. And the access of care, of good quality care is also not going to be as available. So it's important to keep that in mind, that things just aren't free. We got to work for it. And it's the same with freedom. We got to work for it. It just doesn't come by itself.
yeah, even here in Idaho with this Medicaid expansion, where they underestimated how much it was going to cost, and now we have able-bodied adults getting free healthcare on the backs of taxpayers. Now I have friends, neighbors who are not able to get the care that they need. My sister-in-law has MS, and she just can't get care because there's so many more people who have been absorbed into the system. And I'm afraid we're going to continue to see the quality of care decline, because we just can't afford what's going on.
No. Well, do you have any final words, for your voters out there? Because I mean, obviously, I'm going to cast my vote for you, but do you have any other final words for people out there so that they can really understand the importance of this race? I actually think that this race is probably, I feel we are kind of at a fork in history, and our actions at this time really decides a lot of what's going to happen in the future.
Yeah, there's so much to talk about, but my website, giddingsforidaho.com, a lot of good content there. We are doing an AR-15 gun giveaway. You just have to sign up with your email address, and then you'll get updates from me, all my newsletters. If you want to know what's really going on at the state level, I have all my newsletters posted on my website as well. And then please just get out and vote, but be an informed voter. There's lots of good voting guides out there. Try to connect with a conservative group, or hopefully, in your network, reach out to other people who know, and bring your friends, family, and neighbors to the polls. So thank you for the time, Dr. Karlfeldt.
Thank you so much. Thanks for joining me.